Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 581. I had the black pieces. My opponent played d4. Not that. Not e4. He played d4. And I played d5. So I played that a little too quickly because after I checked, I realized I'd just recently played the Slav defense. And now when he plays c4, it took me a while to come up with a different opening. Normally, my alternative to the Slav is a Grinfeld or a Nimzo Indian. But both of those are ruled out by this move that I've played. So I decided, well, let's try the Marshall defense. Now, the Marshall defense is not considered to be very good because of the line here, c takes d5. Knight f3 just transposes into a normal Queen's Gambit opening. You would have to follow up with e6 or c6 to go into a Slav or a Queen's Gambit declined at that point. But the way to challenge the Marshall defense is to take the pawn, and then when black takes back, first you play knight f3 to stop any e5 business, and then you play pawn to e4. And that's good for white. White gets a big center and gains a tempo by kicking the knight to a bad square on b3 is where it usually goes. So the Marshall defense is not considered very good, but I noticed in looking at it that there's this gambit line you could try here, which the engine actually prefers to the main line. So d takes c6, knight takes c6, and then knight f3. These are very normal moves, but I was forgetting the main idea of the gambit, which is this move e5. You have to get in this e5 thrust, and that's really what justifies the gambit. So just to show that, if you play e5 here, and he can take with the pawn or the knight. These lines are kind of similar. The same trick shows up in both of them. So I'll just show one of these lines. Say he takes with the knight, you take back. He trades. You trade queens, and then you play knight g4. So you're down 2 pawns at this point, but you're threatening on f7, and you're also going to gain back this pawn if you want it. So you're going to get one of the pawns back, and he's got to waste another move protecting the f2 pawn. And now you can continue the attack on f2 with bishop c5. That's top choice here. But you can also play knight e5 and just continue to play on a pawn down. You can also play knight takes e5. Another idea here. And so interesting gambit play for black. So that's the way to play it with that e5 move. Actually, after e5, the best move for white here is just to play e3. Try and hold on to the center. And you can take the pawn and then play bishop g4 here. And after you give the engine time to think about it, this turns out to be a playable gambit position for black as well. So anyway, some interesting ideas you can try out on your own sometime. I played in this position, instead of e5, I played bishop g4 immediately. And so after a few moves, basically, he's just shoring up his advantage here. I still have e5, but I played e6. So at this point, he's basically just a pawn up. And my gambit compensation has pretty much disappeared, which is what happens when you don't play a gambit accurately. Anyway, he goes bishop e2, breaking the pin. I develop a piece. He castles and I castle. So all pretty normal stuff. He keeps this edge for the next few moves here. I put a rook on the c file. I'm still going for activity. I mean, you got to try for whatever compensation you can find. He comes out queen b3, hitting my b pawn over here, and I decide eventually to defend with knight a5, and he goes queen a4. I play a6 with the intention of playing b5 to chase the queen away, and he plays bishop d2. Now right here, here's your first tactical quiz opportunity. I went ahead with my plan of playing b5, but actually it does not work in this particular case. So if you want to figure out what's wrong with that move, what would white play in response to b5, you can pause the video and think about it. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away here. I did play b5, and he just retreated his queen, but he could have taken that pawn. Thing is, I was aware there was this discovered attack on my knight, but I thought the attack on his queen was stronger and he'd have to deal with it. But knight takes b5 solves both problems, or it does two things at once. It unleashes the attack on the knight, and it solves the problem of the attack on his queen. His queen is now safe there. And taking back with the pawn, probably the best way to play. now we can grab the knight. The queen can move away from the threat and pick up the knight. So I'm just down 2 pawns in this position, so that would have been the way for white to get probably a winning edge. Went back queen d1, and now even though I'm still 1 pawn down, it seems like I have decent compensation. I guess because this knight c4 move forces him pretty much to give up the bishop pair or to retreat his bishop to a passive square on c1. So he gives up the bishop pair, and now I have active pieces in the bishop pair, and so that's enough compensation for the pawn. He goes b3. I drop my rook back to c6. Would have been a little better on a different square, but well, we'll see. He kicks my bishop with h3. Drop back to h5, and now he comes in with rook c1. And so I'm doing fine to this point, but I make my next move is a mistake, queen d7. Basically, I'm putting pieces on these light squares here where his knight can come in and attack him on e5. And that forces me to give up the bishop pair here. So I was just oblivious to that threat. If I'd been aware of it, I might have gone ahead. I did think briefly about queen c7, but I thought it'd be more effective to bring the rook over and double rooks, and so that's why I went to a different square. But queen c7 is a move here. Also, bishop a3 is a move. So I have good moves here, but this is just a bad one because, well, he plays g4 first, but then he plays knight e4, knight e5. He spots this idea, and that just forces me to give up the bishop pair here. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight here. And now he initiates a bunch of trades, going into a much simpler position. Maybe, okay, well, his first trade was good. At some point, I think this bishop b4 move, unleashing an attack on my queen, was not the best move, because I can equalize here by taking in the right order. I need to take his rook first, so his queen can't take my queen, because then I'll take over here with check. So he has to take the rook back, and then I'm fine. He's got an extra pawn, but it's doubled, and my queen is active, and his king side is a little bit weakened. So that would be the way to equalize this game. Instead, I played rook f8 rather, and that allows him to take the queens off and give me a weak e-pawn, or d-pawn now. And so he's a little bit better in this endgame, and probably winning, even though the bishops are of opposite color. There's still rooks on, and so he has attacking ideas on the dark squares. It can be pretty good for white here. And I make his job easier by not defending this pawn. I thought that my bishop would get chased away from there, but it takes quite a few moves. He can't play f3 immediately. He's got to play his king up to support the pawn to f3. So that's 3 moves before my bishop gets chased away. So I could have just held on to that pawn, and that would have been best play for me. What did I do? I didn't notice that. Didn't realize I could hold on to it. I played h5 trying to get to create some weaknesses over here, and so now I'm just 2 pawns down. I take, takes back, and then I try to activate my rook at c2. So, I have some compensation being 2 pawns down, but this should still be winning for white. Let's see, he goes a3, I go after the b pawn, and he starts counterattacking my pawn. So this part is played well here, I think, by white. He's just gobbling up those pawns, and at the end, he's going to emerge 2 pawns up, and I might be winning even with the opposite colored bishops, plus he still has the rook on. So looking good for white at this point. Let's see, it's my turn. I went rook d3. I wanted to activate my rook and maybe go after these pawns over here somehow. He went e6. Yeah, this was a good move. Busts up my pawns over here on my king side, eliminates some of the protection, and he gets a tempo on my bishop. And then I put his rook back to b6, attacking this pawn. This pawn I can defend. So I'll hold on to the pawn on the queen side, and then try and go after these king side pawns. That's my idea. He plays rook d6, and that's probably a mistake. It looks like, based on this evaluation, that I could trade rooks and go for that opposite colored bishop endgame and probably hold a draw if the engine is not finding anything better than 1.2. It's hard to say offhand. I mean, there are some cases where you can hold that draw and some cases where you can't. And the key is whether you can get this bishop on a good square that manages to restrain 2 pawns, and I wasn't sure that I could do that. I mean, this looks like a promising diagonal here, but it's not clear if white can start pushing these pawns forward after the trade. So anyway, I didn't go for that. I kept the rook on, and now he goes king h2, activating. Go rook b2, still trying to harass these pawns. King g3, king f7. Yeah, I want to get my king off the back rank so it's not trapped in by his rook. He goes f3, and now, yeah, this is the start of a mistake. f3 still, yeah, f4 would have been better though. You know, he should put those pawns on dark squares, I guess. On dark squares, I mean, I do have the possibility of restraining him with my bishop on a diagonal like that. But on light squares, they're a target. So f3 becomes a target here. So maybe a little bit of an error, but still winning for white. Let's see, I went rook b1. I'm trying to get behind these pawns. I went king f4, getting in front of them. Maybe a little bit in the way. I would try and push the pawns forward with the king behind, I guess. And this rook is already well placed here. I go rook g1, looking at his pawns. He goes king e5, and I find this move, which kind of attacks two pawns, keeps him from moving the f-pawn forward, and it threatens the f-pawn at the same time. So he brings his king back. I drop back. So there's a little bit of repetition there, but still a winning position for white. He goes rook d7 check. King comes forward. Oh, I went to g6. Wanted to stay away from the dark squares where his bishop might gain a tempo. He went rook b7, getting behind my pawn again. I went rook f1. Now finally realizing I do have a target in this f-pawn. He goes rook c7. So rook c7, I guess, is the move that loses. Or that allows me to draw. So the winning plan here looks to be, well, let's forget about the rook b6 check. It looks to be e4. What's interesting about this is it just gives up a pawn, because I'm still going to come back here and attack this f-pawn, but he gets another tempo pushing this forward, e4, e5, allowing me to take with check. But now this pawn is very dangerous. Let's see, where do I go? I go rook g3, say, going after this pawn, and rook b6 check, now driving my king back. See, if I go here, he will just advance with check, so that's really losing quickly. King to g5. But now he has a pretty clear path for this pawn. That square is defended by the rook, and that square is defended by the bishop. Yeah, this is looking very dangerous. So that's a winning plan here for white, pushing the e-pawn and the rook b6 check. So instead he played rook to c7, taking a look at my bishop, maybe planning to undermine it with the a-pawn push. But now I can go after the e-pawn here, and this gives me, I think it's probably a draw in spite of that evaluation. I think it's probably drawn from this point forward. He goes rook c5, and I take, king here, and I go after the other pawn now, which he can't defend. Brings his king to f4, take with check, and now the engine finds that it's a draw at this point at last. King here, check, and I wasn't sure at this point. I thought maybe I could try and play for a win and keep the rooks on, but I don't think there's any chance, and the engine doesn't find anything either. So just took the rooks off and went for this drawn position here. We played on a few more moves. Let's just step through them. A little bit of maneuvering. I mean, I do have this passed pawn here on the g-file, and I try to push it, but when he blockades it with the bishop, there's really no life in this position, and we agreed to a draw here. So anyway, thought this was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and maybe you can try out that funny gambit line in the martial defense sometime. Okay, see you guys later. Bye.